Hello senators and legates. Welcome to Total War Tactics. Today we're going to take a closer look at a tactic which has shown to be very effective in real life. But now we need to figure out if it's good enough for Total War. As you can see, we're going to be doing this in Rome 2 with the Divide Et Impera mod enabled. We're going to be covering a tiny bit of historical context, the theoretical formation, how to execute it, the army composition, how to use it against a player and the AI, and last but not least how to defeat it with my final verdict. If there are any parts of this video you want to see, there are timestamps in the description for you to use. But with that said, let's introduce the tactic. The hidden flank can be described as a smaller ambush clouded by the bigger picture of a battle taking place. To give an example of this, we all know of the infamous general and consul Gaius Julius Caesar. He won many battles through his tactics, schemes and intrigue. Not mentioning all of his magnificent achievements is a pity, yet that is exactly what we need to do for us to keep our focus on today's topic. One of Caesar's greatest victories came during the Battle of Pharsalus against Pompey the Great. He was severely outnumbered but found a way to circumnavigate this disadvantage through the hidden flank. His cavalry camouflaged the 6 cohorts hiding behind them so they could approach the enemy cavalry unnoticed. Together they would win the flank and then envelop the enemy army. And as I swore to keep it simple, I won't talk more about the battle than that. However, through this tactic, Caesar turned the tides of the raging civil war. Another way to take a look at it in a more literal sense of the word is by the use of terrain, like Hannibal Barca at the Battle of Trebia. Again, we can't go over the full details of this event and how they impacted the battle. However, we will still talk about how Hannibal showed most of his army on the field, tricking the Romans to believe this was his entire army. But before the battle even started, he had already hidden troops in the terrain on the right flank. They revealed themselves and secured the inevitable victory. These are just 2 of the great generals of the ancient era, who both made use of this tactic in legendary fashion. There are obviously more than that, but those we can talk about in the comments. And with that said, let's talk about how we're gonna do this. We have a few ways to approach this. Most Total War players have probably used the Caesar variant before, during their own battles. As a matter of fact, I know my good friend Mýself used it almost every time. I recommend checking out his content if you haven't yet. However, what I'm going at with this is that we'll use the mentioned version. But it is practically impossible to do this in Total War, as you can always see your opponent's units, unless it is a stalk unit of course, or they are hiding in terrain. But I've used those too many times now and want to stay away from those for at least this video, although they are the obvious choice. Instead, we're gonna put a single fast moving spear unit behind 2 cavalry contingents to run at the enemy. If your opponent somehow doesn't notice them or just focused elsewhere, it should still work out, although not as efficiently as if they actually were hidden. The rest of the army will just do their best to hold out, either through not engaging or by pinning down the enemy. Once the flanks are won, we will come at the enemy like a wave. This is one of the few cases where it is almost as simple as it gets. And if you've seen my other videos, you know what that means. Let's pick the army. All factions should be able to use this tactic to great effect, so if you want to try this yourselves, pick your favorite faction. Of course, the civilized factions will do better, as their hoplites or pike can hold the center for indefinite time, so you can just focus on the flanks while they hold out. But in my case, I'm gonna pick the bowii, or better known as, well, never mind. The units I'm gonna expect to deliver are the long swords, shock infantry, and especially the cavalry, as we're trying to make them work efficiently. Although you might expect the spears to perform as well, their sole purpose is to get quality kills on the enemy, so their count isn't really that precise compared to the others. Other than that, our army is well suited for melee combat and should do a great job. But with that said, let the battle begin, where Gio D is playing as the Iberio. Our flanks were set, with cavalry and spears grouping up. In the center, we formed up in a wedge-type formation, with the shock infantry at the back. However, as the battle progressed, I realized Gio had formed up in an oblique order, severely outnumbering us on our right. In a calculated move, I brought forward the shock infantry in the center, hoping to catch his retreating flank off guard. The right fell back and our left pushed forward. By this advancement, a small skirmish broke out where our combined infantry and cav got some great kills on his medium spears units without being contested. But Gio was committed to engage on our right, and we couldn't fall back any further without breaking our formation. Thus, we allowed him to attack while bringing our few reserves from the left over to the imminent battle. As this went down, I took my shock infantry and caught his retreating flank as we hoped for. They tried to disengage, but that only left them demoralized and routed. However, Gio got an excellent chariot charge into my lines at this point. Over on the right, his cavalry had gone a bit too close to our infantry. We opened a gap in our lines for our mounted men to run them down. By then, we had mainly won on the left, and doing alright elsewhere. I also have a few more examples of how our spears and cav helped one another to gain superiority. In addition to that, how our general made excellent rear charges to help win the smaller battles that started to form. The decisive moment came when one of our cavalry units had caught the enemy general. Skirmishers from both sides gave supporting fire, with even more cavalry rushing over to help in the struggle. Even our general took part in this, but as our infantry from the left finally arrived, the enemy general fell. We had won the battle. I will leave the stats here. I'll just comment on a few things. I was a bit surprised how well our melee units actually did, with most of them getting over 100 kills each. Our shock infantry could do better, especially when we compare them to the ones from Gio's army. Cavalry, meh, that is good enough, except from the two more expensive units. We expected more from them, but it was equaled out by the infantry. And finally, I will give you all a moment to appreciate the chariot kills. It is by far the most kills I've ever seen them get in a multiplayer battle. Yet, for their expensive price, it is still not enough. And with that said, we'll briefly go over a battle against the AI. For this battle, I used the same exact army, but decided to give the AI a major advantage of 8,000 gold. We advanced, engaged the front lines, meanwhile our cavalry and spear combo hunted down the enemy mounted unit. Here we experienced a problem where the enemy cavalry kept disengaging, nullifying the spears almost completely. This made the cavalry fight drag out exponentially, causing a ton of casualties on our front lines. However, as we started to win as we inevitably would, our wave of rear charges finished off the enemy one by one. It ended up being a close victory, a lot worse than I honestly expected. In terms of how to defeat this specific tactic, the key part is how to win the cavalry engagement on the flank. The most obvious way would be by using horse archers or Jaffcav, as they in theory doesn't even get close to the spears that will try to give superiority, as long as you can use them well, like Gio for example in past battles. Another way to do it is by having your own skirmishers in the area to give supporting fire. They will be able to kill enough of the enemy to at least cause a tie in the engagement. Other than that, the third and final method I will give you could be by using your own infantry as the hidden flank. This should be possible as the hidden flank alone isn't some army design tactic, but rather something that only takes up 4 or 6 units from your entire army. And with that said, for my final verdict, I think it is quite obvious how simple and effective this move is. With cavalry being as important as it is and how efficient this is at winning those flank engagements, it should be a must for almost any deployment, against a player that is. Facing the AI is a different story. It seems like the AI is very good at running away from the spears. It is part of their DEI coding, if I'm correct, and it can therefore cause this to be much less effective. So I only recommend this against a player, but other than that, I would like to hear what you think about this tactic in the comments below. And with that said, goodbye and spread happiness.